This is why it sucks to fight Charles Oliveira, and trust me, each reason cuts deeper than the last. The venomous guard. Before the belts and bonuses, Charles was fighting in half-empty arenas in Brazil. Low pay, no crowd noise, and barely enough money for a decent haircut. Though, let's be honest, even today that fade's questionable. But what did he have? A guard that felt like quicksand. I remember watching the Kevin Lee bout with my brothers, sitting on the couch eating microwave pizza that tasted like cardboard and shame. We were arguing, betting push-ups on whether Kevin Lee would wrestle him to death or get caught in something stupid. Turns out, he managed to do both. Let me take you back to UFC Fight Night 170. Charles Oliveira versus Kevin Lee. Lee, 18 wins, 11 finishes, 6 losses. A former interim title contender with NCAA Division II wrestling and powerful boxing. Charles, he was riding a 6-fight finish streak and growing hungrier with every bout. Round 1 was fast. Lee looked sharp, landed combos, stuffed some kicks, even cracked Charles with a clean shot that had the crowd buzzing. Well, the imaginary crowd. Thanks, pandemic. The whole pandemic phase felt like a school play gone wrong. Anyway, mask off, we're done pretending. Charles stayed calm and nasty. Elbows in the clinch and baited Lee into closing the distance. In round 2, Lee shot for a takedown and got it. That's when the trap snapped shut. Charles immediately framed, grabbed wrists, and started shifting his hips like a guy laying tripwires. Upkicks flew, elbows sliced. Lee tried to posture up and instantly had to defend an armbar. By round 3, Lee looked frustrated. He shot again, but this time Charles sprawled, snapped under, and boom, guillotine locked. No space, no escape. Lee tapped, and then forgot he tapped. Tried to keep fighting. The ref had to step in. That's how disorienting Oliveira's guard was. If you're still here, like. If you want more, subscribe. Charles is just getting started. But what's even scarier? He'll break you when you're ahead. The momentum thief. This is one of those topics I've been dying to cover, because if Charles Oliveira is good at anything, it's stealing momentum. And not just in the cage, in life. See, most fans know Charles as the guy who wins with submissions and chaos. But what they don't realize is that this man built his entire legacy off of reversing momentum. From birth, he was born in a favela in Guarujá, Brazil. No money, no support. Just asthma and mud-soaked flip-flops. Doctors literally told his parents he wouldn't live past 10. Now imagine telling that same kid, you'll one day choke out Dustin Poirier on pay-per-view while Joe Rogan screams in your face and Dana White hands you a $1 million belt. Sounds like a Netflix series directed by someone high on microwave pizza and Nina Drama's Instagram reels. But that's Charles. Rock bottom was just his starting point. And by the time he reached UFC 269, he wasn't just defending his title. He was doing what he always does, walking into a fight that everyone thought he'd lose, and flipping the script. Let me take you back to UFC 269. Charles Oliveira versus Dustin Poirier. Poirier, 28 wins, 21 finishes, 7 losses. The people's champ. Elite hands, granite chin, endless cardio, a black belt in jiu-jitsu, and a resume full of killers. Holloway, Gaethje, Hooker, McGregor, twice. He was supposed to drown Charles. Everyone said it. And round 1, it looked like they were right. Charles got tagged hard, twice. He got dropped. The crowd was losing its mind. Even Joe Rogan was halfway out of his seat. But here's the thing. Charles doesn't panic. He hit the ground, adjusted his shorts, and literally started working the angles, while Poirier blew his gas tank trying to finish him. Round 2, tables turned. Charles clinched up, dropped savage elbows, and made Dustin Poirier look like a dude trying to breathe in a phone booth. You could see it. Momentum shifting. Poirier was still throwing, but now he was second guessing. Round 3, checkmate. Charles backpacked him like a student loan. Hooks in, chin under. And Dustin, the same guy who willed himself through 5 rounds with Holloway, tapped. No scream, no celebration. Charles just stood up calm, like Nina Drama sneaking out of your hotel room while texting her next victim. And when you're panicking, that's when he pulls out the one weapon that no one wants to see. The knockdown trap. Once upon a time, hitting the canvas meant it was over for Charles. Now, it's where the story really begins. Before the gold, before the belts, and before the walkouts with Brazilian flags and sunglasses hiding his eyes, Charles Oliveira was just the guy who never quite made it. Not because he wasn't dangerous. He was terrifying if you gave him the first round. But when things got ugly, when punches landed, when blood hit the mat, Charles disappeared. Not literally, but emotionally. Mentally, he'd fade, give up positions, tap when others would grit their teeth. And in a sport filled with savages, that kind of reputation spreads fast. He was the submission artist you didn't trust in deep waters, the jiu-jitsu prodigy who never seemed built for war. For years, every time Charles walked to the octagon, fans asked the same question: is he finally different, or is he gonna break again? So when he got his shot at the title against Michael Chandler, of all people, it wasn't just a championship fight. It was a confrontation with his own past. Would he rise like a champion, or crumble like the Charles we used to know? Let me take you back to UFC 262. Charles Oliveira versus Michael Chandler. Chandler, 22 wins, 17 finishes, 6 losses. A fucking monster with NCAA Division I wrestling credentials and knockout power that had already flattened his UFC debut. The opening seconds showed promise. Charles moved with confidence, snapping kicks and long punches. But then came the bomb. Midway through the first round, Chandler landed a monster right. Charles dropped. The arena erupted. For a second, the ghost of old Oliveira flashed across the screen. But what most people missed was the way Charles fell. Controlled, measured, like he'd fallen there 100 times before. Chandler followed him cautiously, throwing bombs from the top, but Charles stayed dangerous. Up kicks, elbows, a shifting guard that forced Chandler to stand and disengage. And that's where the trap closed. The second round barely started before Charles stepped in with a clean left hook. Boom! Chandler went down. This time, for good. Charles swarmed. Clean shots. Referee Dan Miragliotta stepped in. 19 seconds into round 2. Charles Oliveira was the new lightweight champion. Not by surviving, but by battling a monster, walking through fire, and proving he was no longer the quitter everyone remembered. He'd earned the belt, but holding on to it, that would require something even more terrifying. The neck collector. Some fighters are known for knockouts, others for trash talk.
Is a fucking snitch rat.
But Charles Oliveira, he holds the all-time UFC record for most submissions. Not 1, not 2, 21. Kevin Lee, Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, Clay Guida, Jim Miller, guys with serious submission defense, tapped like a UFC fighter who just got a DM from Nina Drama. And that's where the story gets crazy. See, this part of the story isn't about numbers. It's about doing something way more bizarre. We all remember Khabib, neck collector, bear wrestler, Dagestani dungeon boss, and now Islam Makhachev is carrying the same torch. But here's the real UFC plot twist. And no, not the Nina Drama Tom Aspinall thing. Islam didn't just beat Charles, he submitted him in the exact same position Charles usually finishes people. Let that sink in. And that's when I was thinking, Khabib had bears, snow mats, government training. Charles just cracked pavement, asthma meds, and flip-flops in a favela. No heat, no mats, no coach screaming in Russian. Just a sick kid rolling with giants, dreaming of necks, and chasing a future nobody believed in but him. In 2004, at just 14 years old, he walked into a local jiu-jitsu gym. Skinny, quiet, and praying they'd let him train for free. They said yes, because even then, Charles moved like a ferret high on Red Bull. He drilled the same choke until his fingers burned. He'd roll with dudes twice his size and still snake around their neck like it owed him back rent. Then he'd walk home barefoot, dodging potholes and stray dogs, planning the next day's moves in his head. So when people ask how Charles became the UFC submission king, it wasn't through some ancient martial arts lineage or Dagestani grit. It was pure obsession, hundreds of reps, and the kind of hunger that makes you shadow roll rear naked chokes while brushing your teeth. And if you think that's just gym folklore, ask Justin Gaethje. Because out of all the brawlers in the UFC, he was supposed to be the last guy Charles could choke. Guess what? Spoiler, he barely lasted 3 minutes. Let me take you back to UFC 274, Oliveira versus Justin Gaethje. Gaethje, 23 wins, 19 finishes, 4 losses. A D1 wrestler turned demolition man with the kicking power of a mule on caffeine. He just survived a war with Chandler and was being called the most violent man in the UFC. Round 1, he dropped Charles twice. The crowd went feral. It looked like the pressure would finally break him. But Charles stood up, calm as ever, clinched, tripped, mounted, slid to the back. Seconds later, Justin's eyes were wide, his hands tapping. Charles let go like he just finished tying his shoes. No blood, no drama. Just another neck for the collection. Pain was never the problem. It was the process. Because pain is progress, baby. Pressure makes him prettier. Before he was champ, before the belts and bonuses, before Joe Rogan screamed his name into the microphone, Charles Oliveira was known for one thing: cracking under pressure. Not the good kind of pressure, the ugly kind. The type that makes your legs heavy and your heart race like it forgot the beat. Ask any OG UFC fan, they'll tell you. Charles had talent, but no toughness. He'd win early and lose late. And when things got ugly, so did his record. But that version of Charles, he's dead. Somewhere between the 11th and the 12th win of his streak, the pressure didn't break him anymore. It started polishing him. Not figuratively, literally. There's a footage of him backstage, right after choking Tony Ferguson for 3 rounds straight, fixing his hair in the mirror like he's heading to a photo shoot. Meanwhile, his ears are bleeding. That's not just confidence, that's transformation. Because Charles didn't come from comfort. He came from a place where pressure wasn't a feeling. It was a lifestyle. He didn't have mental coaches or mindset podcasts. He had asthma, flip-flops, and a dream. He failed, he folded, he learned. And one day, when the world was watching, the pressure that used to break him started to shake him into something lethal. Let me take you back to UFC 256. Charles Oliveira versus Tony Ferguson. Tony was, at the moment, riding a 12-fight win streak, known for elbows, chaos, and cardio that belongs in a horror film. He was the boogeyman, the guy who breaks people, the one who laughs when you hit him. Round 1, takedown. Within seconds, he's in full mount, then transitions, then boom, armbar. The ref watches. Joe Rogan's voice cracks. I mean, look at this. If you're not convinced yet that Tony is from another planet, then I don't know what will convince you. Round 2, more pressure. Charles dragged Tony down again, and while on his back, Tony threw an illegal upkick to Charles' head while Charles was still considered as a grounded opponent. The referee immediately paused the fight, had the doctor check on Charles, and after a quick medical clearance, the bout resumed. Round 3, same story. Charles stayed on top of him with relentless control and zero mercy. Tony looked lost, confused, drowning in a type of dominance he used to dish out. There was no finish, but it didn't matter. After 3 brutal rounds, Charles won by unanimous decision, 30-26 on all cards. A shutout against the boogeyman, and he did it with pure pressure. But you know what's scarier than Oliveira under pressure? Oliveira with a point to prove. The resurrection statement. Before we start, let me remind you of one thing. Charles Oliveira had just been dismantled by Islam Makhachev. Dropped, submitted, silenced. Everyone thought it was over. The streak, dead. The hype, gone. Even Dana started saying things like, maybe he doesn't want it anymore. But Charles didn't talk back. He just booked a fight and signed a bout agreement against a guy on an 8-fight win streak. A guy that nobody wanted to fight. Beneil Dariush. Let me take you back to UFC 289. Charles Oliveira versus Beneil Dariush. Dariush, 22 wins, 13 finishes, black belt in jiu-jitsu, D1 wrestling background, and an awkward striking style that made him unpredictable. He had just outclassed Mateus Gamrot and was on the verge of a title shot. And most analysts said this would be the end of Charles Oliveira. Round 1, Dariush starts strong. He closes the distance, lands a few heavy left hands, and gets a takedown. Crowd goes quiet. Dariush is in top control. Charles is flat on his back. And then it shifts. Charles throws up his legs like he's playing open guard on a street corner in Brazil. He gets up, lands a head kick. Suddenly, Dariush is backing up. Charles smells it, walking him down, lands a left, another one. A right hand cracks him against the face. Dariush stumbles. Charles swarms. Knees, elbows, hammer fists. Ref steps in, done. From favela mud to octagon lights, Charles turned pain into progress, baby. No excuses, no fear. Just pressure perfected over years. Watch this next video.